Daf Kuf. We're starting from Amud Bet, 4 lines, 3 lines from the top. The last thing mentioned was Shemuel's explanation of the Mishnah. He explained the Mishnah. The Mishnah is talking about not the actual Ibid itself, because of a few questions we had, but rather because we're talking about the clothing of the Ibid. The Gemara has a question though. The Mishnah never said anything about his clothing. Every time, about the actual slave, not the garment. Elamar Be'Hoshea has a different explanation. The crier says that he bought a large slave with his garment, and the seller says this is the small one with the garment. So the Moreha, and also regarding fields, referring to fields with their with the grain sheaves, big or small. So I said, okay, fine. We just went through this whole concept that if you're talking about clothing or other things, then if the guy is admitting to something else, then it's not considered mudad. It's not considered partial admission. He's admitting on B when he was claimed A. There's no swearing there. Gemara says, the answer is we said the same thing earlier. It's not the Alfi, a patchwork of clothing, cloths of clothing, and therefore he is admitting to partial because he thought it was going to be a bigger patchwork, and he got a small patchwork. So therefore, it is a partial admission. Kasha of Sheshet, but this Sheshet still had a problem. What does that mean? That means how are we swearing? We're swearing because of the clothing, and we're transferring that shivua onto the Ibid. That's a transfer, a rolling over, like we had earlier with Gilguz, and everything. Zokakin also. I mean, you're teaching us the concept of rolling over a shivua from one thing to the next. It's a different Mishnah, so that's clearly. Movable property, like over here, the clothing, can make a real property, which is considered usually real estate, or now we're saying Evid also, that you're allowed to make a shivua. So movable property can make a shivua. If you're swearing on movable property, it can also make you swear on quote unquote real property, which is an Evid or land. So that's the same exact halacha. Why wouldn't our Mishnah teach you that? Where it says Elam Rav Shet ben Answer. Hamani, who's in our Mishnah saying that you're able to swear over here by the Evid? The Meir is according to the Meir that Mar Abda that a slave is like movable property, and that's why he's able to swear. He's not considered like karka. Whereas okay, two other questions. If that's the case, but we still have another problem. He's not supposed to swear because he didn't admit to what the claim was. He didn't do a partial admission. There's no madav misat. The Gemara says patur. There's no like Rabban Gamliel holds that the partial admission does not need to be the same item. It could be completely different, like barley and wheat. So okay, we have a third question. Akati helach. He's saying the same concept of helach. Helach means when the guy says, "Hey, I don't owe you what you say I owe you, but here is the thing that I do owe you." There's no shivu on that concept of here as well. I didn't sell you the big of it. I gave you the small of it, and here the small of it is. So then there should be no shivu. The Gemara says, the it's referring to where the slave had cut off the hand of the slave, or if it was talking about the field, this is he dug holes and stuff on the field. Therefore, he ruined it. He ruined the thing that was sold. Therefore, that transaction kind of is no longer. He can't take that anymore, and therefore that's not considered a transaction. So that transaction automatically fell apart. The smaller field, the smaller Evid, he ruined it. And now the question is on the bigger one, therefore it's able to do shivua, and there's no helach, there's no such thing as here it is, because that the quote unquote here it is items are ineligible. Okay, so how did Meir? We heard the Meir say the opposite, that a slave is like real estate, and therefore you can't swear. But at the time, Mishnah says, Gazal behimav his kina. Someone stole an animal and they got older, therefore dropped in price. Avadim behizkin, where he stole a slave and they got older. Meshalem b'kirad you pay the time of the robbery, which is like metatalin, movable objects. But regarding slave, according to the Meir, he holds that a slave you can say, here it is before you. Here it is, but it is what it is, as they say. So the only other time we say that here it is, here's your item, is by real estate. So we see from over here, and Meir seemingly holds that an item is like real estate. So you should not be able to swear. Rabba changed the opinions. He paid the time of robbery, even by slave. So we see it's like document, movable. Hamim were hold that of a demon is like real estate, and therefore everything fits. So from where we know that Meir holds that we compare land to a slave, that we could say that a slave swears just like land. Maybe only swear by land. Avakaka, look, you can't swear by land. But so by Evid, we do make a shivua, but by land, we don't make a shivua. Where it says, La Sakadach, no. There's no difference between slaves and land. It's not even breda. I'm a Halif Parabi, Hamor Bela, someone exchanges the cow for a donkey and it gives birth. וכן, המוכר שבחה בידה, so too if a שבחה כנענית has a child, should take it. One guy says, it's mine. The other one says he's quiet because no zacha. The guy who is certain keeps it. I don't know, but the guy says I don't know. We split it like some hosts. This one says it was in my property. This one says it's my property. This other swears that it gave birth while it's his, and therefore he keeps it. If he because all swearing in the Torah you could swear and get off scot free. The Rameir according to the Rameir, which you don't swear on slaves and karkaot on land. So we see lab mechada about sounds like from there we're proving that a mayor would equate land and evet. Perfect. The Gemara says that. That's not a good proof. Just like Hamim said, you don't swear just like you agree to us. Right? Meaning the Hamim are saying just like you agree. You'll agree to us that you can't swear by real estate. So to maybe Rameir, you should agree to us by slaves that you should also can't swear, and Rameir disagrees that you can. So therefore, there's no proof that Rameir would equate them. Maybe he doesn't hold by karka. You should know that Rameir does hold that you can't swear by the land. Things are like land and things are not like land. What does that mean? The not agree. How was that case? Someone says, I gave you 10 vines of grapes that were filled with grapes. The other guy says, no, there are only 5. Rabbi says you can make him swear. Anything attached to land is like land. So we see, the machlok is somewhat referring to when these grapes are ripe. That's when we're not sure. The more savar consider them in according to the mayor holds they're considered harvested and therefore they're movable property. That's why the mayor says you can swear. When more savar love to done and hold that and not considered harvested, they're still attached. Therefore, the land you can't swear. So we see from here that Rabbi Yosef teaches us clearly that a mayor holds that in general, land and unripened fruit would be considered regular land, and you can't swear. Only the time you could swear by quote unquote land is when it's ripened fruits, because we look at them as already harvested. Okay, so now the problem with that is that Rameir was seemingly held that you have to swear by land as well. So what do you need any Gilgul Shavua? We could explain like Rav Shia. The Kashtan Zokin, so now you had a question before. So Rav Shia, we already know the Chidush of moving a Shavua from one to the next. It's we didn't mention, but this case is case with Evid. You might have thought that you can't because maybe a slave's garment is like him. That mean also the sheaves of the field, like the field itself, and therefore you can't roll the Shavua. Mashmalan, you can. The mentality is considered separate, and you can the clothing is considered separate, and you can roll it onto the Evid. Next, last part of the shot. The cases each one says I don't know who is one. They split it. How money is according to some who's who. Doubt, money and doubt, you split. But then the last part of the Braita says each guy says I don't it's mine. The seller swears that it was his and then he takes it. But according to Rabbi who says that you don't swear and you split automatically, even if both cases are certain. So how come over here they swear it should be automatic split? Where it says, we said Simchus agrees that in a case where there is a Doraita of Shavua, he does swear. And over here, the reason why he has to swear is because we have that case, we established the case where the guy cut off the hand, and therefore there is no more Shavua on this. There is no more discussion about this smaller slave or field because it's already damaged, and therefore it's not considered halach, and that's why there is no shavua. Okay. Someone's selling his olive trees for wood. I sell it to Reuven, my olive trees to use for wood, but he didn't chop it down. It grew as a minor amount, less than a quarter log per se'ah. It's a very minor amount. It belongs to the owner of the olive trees. We'll explain everything in the Megillah. Asur if eat l'sa'ah. Let's say it grew this certain amount, this quarter log per se'ah. Zomer is that each one said the buyer says it's my trees. I bought the wood. Zomer but the seller says no, my land made it because it's my land, my nutrients in my earth. I hopefully split it. Shataf nahar zetav. Let's say a river carried someone's olive trees. It dropped them in someone else's field and it grew into the ground. This one says my trees grew it. This one says my trees grew it. They split it because it's his trees and your land. So what's the case of this? The tree, the first case of the wood. If the guy says, take the trees and chop them down. I feel anything should belong to the owner of the land because it's I told you to take it. I like call him out the bait because but if the guy says chop it whenever you want, I feel it not. So even if it was more than a quarter log, and more than that minimum amount, it should belong to the owner of the trees because it's his right to take whatever he wants. So what's the case in the Mishnah that you split it? The Amar Listama, he told him, here's the trees, and he didn't tell him when to cut it down. Therefore, if it's less than that quarter log of oil per sa'ah, person is not machmir, he's not particular. And that's why the seller doesn't care about it, the buyer takes it. If you eat once it's a quarter log, they are machmir, and that's when they have to split it. We said it's a quarter log in order to be hitting that quota, let's say it's $1,000 worth. That's excluding the expense of picking it and pressing it. So we have a quarter log of oil from these olives. If it was exactly that amount, it doesn't count because you have to pay for the labor and stuff. So it has to be, let's say it's $100 of labor and it has to be worth $1,000, so it has to be $1,100 worth of product. Okay. Next part of the Mishnah says, the river carried the trees and dropped them off elsewhere, you split it. The only time that applies, they split the olives when the trees were uprooted with the earth and the roots. After 3 years. Because why? We'll explain. But because after 3 years, the first 2 years are orla. So if we'll explain in a second. But within the first 3 years, but within the first 3 years, it belongs to the owner of the olive trees, the Amarle, because you could tell the neighbor, the reason why it should belong to me within the seller or the original owner of the trees before they got flooded. Because you got my trees, you got like a freebie. How? If you were to plant the trees now, the first 3 years of Orla, you can't touch it. So now the first 3 years should automatically belong to me. That's not true. That's not fair because after 3 years, if I would have planted my own trees, then I could keep everything after, but I still split with you. So now you should eat the half with me as well now. Explanation. They did not say that you split it, except when the trees were uprooted with the dirt. We talk only the first 3 years you have to split it. But after 3 years, it belongs to the owner of the land. I would have planted it right away. I could have been eating everything after 3 years myself. So therefore, after 3 years, your time's over. He says, okay, fine, but if you plant your own trees, then the first 3 years you wouldn't be eating anything at all. And because I'm giving you that 3-year express, that you're able to have the first 3 years, you get to share it you have to share it with me even afterward. Where it says Mishum Damar Le, it's not true. Because your trees are huge. They landed in my land, they're very tall, and therefore they limited my planting. And therefore, the shadow of a large tree that I have immediately, instead of planting slowly, stopped me from growing other stuff. If I would have planted my own trees, I would have additional benefit because, first of all, after 3 years, I keep it myself. And second of all, those first 3 years, they're short. And therefore, I could have grown other vegetation nearby. And therefore, I get to keep half the produce and share it with you the first 3 years. Tana, Amar Halazatev Aninu. If that guy said to the neighbor, I'm taking back my trees, I'm taking it back, I want to dig it up. And Shalina, you don't let him do it. My Tama, why? Because Maria Yishuv because of the importance of settling the land of Eretz Israel, which means if you were to pull it out, it might ruin the ground permanently, and that will damage the land of Eretz Israel. Amar b'Yirmiyah kigon da ticharabah. This type of halacha, needed this reason. Meaning, if we would have said that Stam Asur, it might apply everywhere. Therefore, we had to explain there's only Eretz Israel to teach you that this halacha only applies in Eretz Israel. But outside Eretz Israel, you can uproot it. Mishnah, someone leases the land of his father's ancestral land from a goy. Maaser has to give the produce to Maaser, and then give the goy. So if he has 100, he has to give the 22% to the Maaser, and then that comes off his 50%. He gives the 22% of Maaser from the 100, from the full stash, and then he has to give the goy the 50%, and he only gets his 28% instead of 50%. You're doing Maaser on the full amount, even though you're not getting the full amount. Savrua, we seemingly are saying, what's referring to an ancestral field, the land in Eretz Israel. Why is it considered your ancestral land? Because today Abraham Yaakov belongs to Abraham Yaakov. Well, now we're assuming also that he would be held. And a goy's ownership in Eretz Israel does not stop you from giving maaser. And therefore, a sharecropper in this case is like as if he's in the tenant of the land, and therefore he practically as if he owns it, and therefore just like a leased field produces, you have to pay the owner. Therefore, you also have to give maaser and pay the owner. So like when he's paying his debt, because he's paying his debt. So over here, the sharecropper has to pay off his debt. He has to first give maaser and then give the owner. Someone's leasing a land, ancestral land from a goy who's oppressing him, which means he kind of grabbed the land out of his clutches with force. Maaser to give maaser, and then he gives his share, the goy his share. Why does it mention over there specifically a guy who's oppressing him? Even a non-oppressor. So that shows us that it's not limited to goyim automatically in Eretz Israel that you have to give maaser. Rather, we have to explain it again. Yesh kinyan Eretz Israel, a goy can own Eretz Israel land to stop you from giving maaser. It will stop you. And therefore, also a sharecropper is not considered like a tenant, and therefore he doesn't have to give maaser on it. What does it mean? It's ancestral land. Is referring to it literally belonged to his fathers at one point. Hachamim are giving him a knas, a penalty. The idea that Havile, since the field dear to him, he would have accepted the cost of giving maaser and lease it anyway. But a regular person won't chase after the land to work it out of love because it doesn't mean anything to him, and therefore he won't give maaser. Okay, so what's he getting penalized for? Where it says, because we want to give the land in his heart and make him hustle to buy it back. If we penalize him with this, he's gonna want to learn at least he's gonna want to work the land because it belongs to his family. While he's working the land, he's gonna give maaser, it's gonna bother him. He's gonna work hard to buy it back. This is a big halacha again that we needed an explanation to explain what's going on. Itmar. Someone goes to someone else's land and plants a tree there without his agreement. You evaluate the expenses and how much he improved the land, and he gets the lower amount. The expenses were higher, you pay for the improvement. The improvements are higher, you pay for the expenses. We estimate how much a person would want for someone else to plant the trees in his field, and that's how much he gets paid. Shmuel is referring to a case where a field that wants to be planted, that's why you're paying him for the planting. And Rav is talking about a field that was not for trees, rather if it was grain, therefore you didn't help him out, and that's why you have the lower hand. With Rav was not said specifically. We learned that we inferred it from elsewhere. This type of thing happened by Rav. Rav said, go evaluate how much it was worth. He didn't say which way you're evaluating. The landlord said, I don't want this trees in the first place. I wanted to use grain. Okay, just still evaluate. He has the lower hand. He has to pay the lower value because the guy didn't want it, like we said. The guy said, I still don't want it. I wanted it for grain. And he said, the guy come into that afterward. The guy didn't kish the trees. He put a fence up to guard the trees. So we see by blocking the field and not blocking the trees with a fence, and by not removing them, I see that you did agree. You do like it, and therefore Zil Shumne, go evaluate how much you should pay. He has the upper hand for planting the trees because now you're showing you wanted it, and therefore you have to pay him for all his work like a regular worker, and now he does not have the lower hand; he has the upper hand. Amen. Amen.